So we're going to be talking about strengthening society, how entrepreneurship benefits our world. And with me tonight, we have three panelists. We have Brian Cliette and Diallo Powell, which I asked him when I first met him what Diallo meant, and it actually means bold, which is a wonderful background. And then Brian Sauder. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Eric Sauder. Okay, that's my, I have my mistake for the evening. And we're gonna engage a little bit on their background, but then we're gonna get into more, we've had some really interesting discussions together about really how to motivate change within our communities and in a broader sense, and I really wanna get to that tonight as well. So I'd like to start by having each of you tell us how you are currently engaging in strengthening society and benefiting our world. So the work that you're currently doing. Eric, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so it's great to be here and be back in State College. The work that I'm doing right now is primarily focused on climate change and has been for the last 6 or so years. And so I'm really fascinated with how we take really big international climate targets and bring them down into communities where they're actionable. And there's just a whole lot of work to do that. There's a lot of entrepreneurship needed at all of these granular scales. So some of it's innovation, some of it's new stuff that we're figuring out how to do this for the first time, but a lot of it's figuring out how to make this work in a place that hasn't really ever done it before. And so that's the core element of my work right now.
Yes, so it's loud. I'm working on addressing the #1 contributor to climate change, which is transportation in our cities. So really focused on figuring out how we can penetrate inner city places that are space constrained, more densely populated, and scaling infrastructure in order to promote EV ownership or transitioning to EV fleets and doing what we can to facilitate and support that.
Brian Cliette here. Currently I run growth at Evidation Health. We're a telemedicine startup or scale up. We're pre-IPO. And right now we're addressing a lot of the health disparities that currently placate a lot of our underrepresented populations. So we use patient-generated health data along with artificial intelligence, as well as allowing said groups access to early clinical trials. So that's kind of my career orientation around making the world a better place. More on a personal level, I'm very big on financial literacy. So me, along with a lot of my colleagues, have taken it upon ourselves to educate and to address the racial wealth divide. So our goal is to try to stifle the racial wealth gap within one generation, and we're doing this by teaching financial literacy to high school students as well as adults and families, teach them everything from stock investing, options, investing in early stage startups, what that looks like, credit, debt management, et cetera.
So in the next hour, we're going to tackle infrastructure, climate change, health, and financial literacy. I think we're up I think we're up to this challenge. So I'd like each of you to share a bit about your journey and what led you to having a focus on sustainability, social impact, and the items that you noted already. Diallo, would you like to start?
Sure. So I actually I grew up in management consulting at Big Four management consulting firms, Deloitte in strategy and operations, Ernst & Young business transformation, and actually didn't really have an appreciation for that until much later, everything that I learned there. But was focused on Fortune 500 companies working in financial and then in healthcare, and spent most of my career there in healthcare. And just got to the point where I realized I wanted to do something more impactful. I wanted to do something more entrepreneurial. And at one point I was approached and there was a group in Brooklyn, New York, in Dumbo, Brooklyn, if any of you know New York City. And they were interested in starting a health insurance company from scratch. And everyone said they were crazy and it wouldn't work. They also had the goal of being able to sell health insurance direct to consumer, which no one else had done before. And everyone said, hey, that's not how health insurance is sold. It's sold through brokers. So I took a leap of faith. I joined them. We were focused on the gig economy and contract workers. And I joined, was later the GM and the CIO of the parent company and the health insurance company we started, which grew to about a $100 million company in 2 years. And then we worked when the ACA, the exchanges were coming out to launch 3 more. Once we did that, I was working as an entrepreneur where I got just a lot of really great experience in how to start businesses, how to start companies, and then left the nest and was a full-fledged entrepreneur and was a co-founder of a health tech company. And we built a consumer product, and the goal was to empower consumers with information and data on healthcare costs, healthcare eligibility, just creating more informed consumers. So we built that company out. We actually started selling this, B2B2C, so we white labeled it through insurance companies. And in 2020, that company was acquired by private equity, by Thoma Bravo, sorry. And then I just started, exploring and looking for the next thing. And I was just really interested in the idea of sustainability, climate impact, and at the same time, I was exploring on the tech side, just mobile IoT, connecting the digital to the physical world and those kinds of technologies, and just connected with a group that was working on some industrial technology, and we brought the two sides together to create a pretty unique experience, which was the beginning of Stak Mobility, which is the company that I'm the CEO and co-founder of now. And have any of you ever seen Carvana? You know Carvana? Uh-huh. You've seen the vending machines, the car vending machines? Yeah. So we are pretty much taking that technology and using that to scale EV infrastructure in inner cities. We worked with the manufacturer. We have patented technology to integrate level 2 EV charging into it. We're putting solar caps on top of it to use solar power, integrating it with distributed energy, and using renewable energy credits as well, so make sure we're using green energy. And so we're at the point now where we're going out around the city. We're acquiring plots of land and gearing up to start deploying our first sites. So yeah, we're very excited. We're early stage, but a lot of potential.
Yeah, thank you. Eric, do you want to talk about a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so one of the experiences that was really transformative for me was in freshman year here. I got to go over the summer to the Ojibwe Reservation in northern Minnesota. Got to spend the summer there and got to go to a Superfund site with Winona LaDuke, who was Ralph Nader's running mate with the Green Party. And she showed me this lake that a paper mill had dumped all of their industrial waste in for years and years. And of course, they're bottom up and gone. But everybody in the community is dying of cancer in their 30s. And there's nothing to do about it. It's just how it is now. And that was one of my first really crystallizing environmental experiences that set a path for the rest of my work. I did an undergrad in mechanical engineering, a master's in architectural engineering here with what was the precursor to the Sustainability Institute. Came out of Penn State and worked with a green building company, and at the same time launched a nonprofit called New Leaf Initiative, which was a nonprofit social innovation hub that was to serve young people like me that wanted to create some kind of positive change in the world but didn't know where to start with that or couldn't find the connections in the community to do that work. We then launched a co-working office with that to bring more people together and to try to find a business model that would support the whole nonprofit idea. I had my own cancer run-in about 6 years ago, and that was enough of a reason for my wife and I to say, we need to get back to the family in case this really goes off the rails. but it was an important refocusing time for me. I joined an agricultural consulting firm that I had interned with in the upheaval meant for it to be, like a 3-month short contract thing. In that time, discovered the drawdown analysis, which looks at what are the top 100 solutions for reversing global warming, and noticed how many of those were connected to agriculture and how important rural communities are in climate work. And because of how politically charged climate is, we've often assumed that it's just the cities that are going to do anything about climate change. But here I was talking with farmers about climate change, and they were really responsive and engaged about it. And many of them are doing really phenomenal climate-based work. And so I find myself once again in a place where, during the last panel we were talking about building the things that people want, being like the core tenet of what you need to do in entrepreneurship. Well, I keep finding myself building the things that people don't want yet and trying to figure out how to make that actually work. And so started another nonprofit called RegenAll that's focused on bringing regeneration to rural and urban communities and bringing much more of a regional, holistic view on how communities can respond to climate change, essentially like creating local Green New Deals that are really place-based, but definitely not calling them Green New Deals.
Brian?
Awesome. So, great stories, by the way. A little bit about my story. I've always been super scrappy. So, oftentimes a lot of entrepreneurs make a decision to be an entrepreneur. At least that's almost a choice that we have here, typically in the United States. But if you look globally, you have what I like to refer to as like situational entrepreneurs. Like, you have to hustle, you have to sell something, you have to offer some type of service just to put food on the table. So in looking at my college years, the way that I was able to pay for my education down in Miami was through doing websites for local small businesses, doing search engine optimization. All the while going to school, I was kind of learning this kind of digital art and mastering kind of this digital space. And upon graduating, because I was doing all these digital marketing efforts, and I would sell hot dogs out of my dorm room and sandwiches, anything that was, allowed me to kind of pay for my schooling between scholarships and try to avoid this thing about debt, right? So I grew up in a house, and I was like, better not have any debt. Credit cards are bad. Debt is horrible. Just for context, I grew up in a Muslim household, so debt is actually a prohibition in Islam. So that was one parameter that I've always also had to navigate as an entrepreneur, be even more scrappy, because I didn't have the idea or the advantage of using credit cards and leverage, et cetera. So through all these scrappy years, come to graduate, looking for a job, going to interviews, and they're like, we're hiring you for what job? Your resume is like 10 pages long. And I studied hospitality and restaurant management at Florida International in Miami, but I never worked in a restaurant a day in my life. And I remember I was interviewing with Marriott for some position, and they were like, why are we interviewing you again? I was like, oh, it's a favor to my professor. He was like, yeah, I realized that, but why should Marriott hire you? And this is some years ago, okay? I was like, well, I could take a keyword on Google and I could make your website #1 for that keyword. And this is no lie. This is an executive recruiter that was doing a favor for a professor. They went to Cornell University together. And he looked me in my eye. He's like, why would we want to do that? Right? So fast forward many decades later, I'm pretty sure that he would want to give me a call. So that led to me not being able to land a job, so I have to call mom and dad, like, I couldn't land a job, I just kind of keep doing all these side hustle things. Now keep in mind, when I graduated college, we didn't have all the gig economy, so you had to build everything from scratch. I couldn't drive Uber, there was no Uber, right? I was just driving friends around, charging them to go to the grocery store, they buy me a few groceries kind of thing, right? That was Uber. Before Airbnb, I would lease an apartment and have like 6 friends living in different bedrooms so I could stay there for free, right? So all of these kind of gig economies, and I think Eric and Diallo all highlighted on it, these things came out of like necessity. Like, what are solutions, what are problems that you're facing? So fast forward many moons, I kind of found my way. I found some opportunities. A professor did really well in this class. It was a feasibility class. So I started working with this firm, Pinnacle Advisory Group, and I started working as a feasibility analyst. So I would help hotel developers find sites for hotels. So I was really scrappy. I was really good with the internet, really good at research, always very comfortable with numbers and accounting, analytics. So started working with this consulting firm for free for 6 months. And had to sustain myself, but had all these house hacking things and grocery store hacking things going on. That opportunity led to me working for them for about 2 years. And then that moved on to me actually moving to another firm, HVS, Hospitality Evaluation Services Solutions. And I worked on a deal with Goldman and Sachs when they were acquiring 120 AmeriSuites in Hampton Inns in South Florida. They actually hired me to do the appraisals. And that was kind of like my aha moment, where I went from kind of like the pursuit of happiness kind of thing. So after that deal, wind up getting a job in investment banking. I worked in investment banking for about 1.5 years, 2 years. After working 70, 80 hours a week, I met with my then managing director, who was about 54 years old at the time, had heart disease, liver disease, had a $250,000 car. He had that big Porsche when it first came out. Had a lovely home in Coral Gables that cost about $8 million. And he made probably about $5 million a year. His current girlfriend was a married woman. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but this is Miami. Had 3 children, all estranged, and had been married and divorced 2 or 3 times. And we're sitting at breakfast. We had a weekly breakfast meeting one day, and I'm like looking at him, and I'm kind of like seeing myself. It's like, man, like he has the money, he has this, but he doesn't have health. He has the money, he has this, but he doesn't have love. He has the money, he has this, he doesn't have close relationships. And I was like, I don't know if this is like me. So he says, Brian, you know what, you're too honest for investment banking. An opportunity came up for me to get into academia. So a colleague of mine called me from North Carolina Central University, said, hey, Brian, you've done some really cool things in hospitality. You've done all this digital marketing. Can you help me grow a hospitality program at North Carolina Central? And at this moment, at this time, this was the only online program in hospitality in the state of North Carolina. I said, sure. Left Miami, moved to North Carolina, helped grow the program. Then got a call from Penn State 2 years later, said, hey, you're doing some really cool things out in North Carolina Central. Can you come to Penn State and help us develop curriculum in digital marketing and social media? I said, cool. So one thing led to another. My wife is from the Bay Area. As a clinical professor here at Penn State, I would spend my time in the Bay Area during the summers. I was like, you know what, instead of just sitting here, San Jose, let me head to San Francisco, started hooking up with a lot of startups. And all these little scrappy opportunities and experiments that I ran over the years were of great value to these startups because they had great ideas, they just didn't know how to take it to market. So over the past 10 years, I've had opportunities to take 2 companies from 0 to $2 million. I've worked with a couple of companies raising funds, Series A. Right now, the current company I'm with is Series D. They have a $1 billion valuation. So all start from scrappy, couldn't get a job at Marriott. Now I'm here speaking to you guys about doing marketing.
That's excellent. There's a couple, there's 2 themes. I think scrappy defines each of you, or all of us at some level. And the other thing that I think is a great lesson for our students that are in the room and listening is the path is non-linear. It doesn't, don't assume that you're going from what you're studying today or what you're doing today to your career for the next 40 years, where it's very, there's going to be twists and turns, and embrace those, because I think all of us can say we love what we do, and we're
love what I do.
And we're satisfied with what we do, and it's partially because we have not had a linear path. So be open to those opportunities. So let's go back to our topic. How do you see entrepreneurship benefiting our world? Brian, do you want to tackle that one first?
Sure, and I'll be a little more concise than my story. I think there are 2 major inflection points or impact points for entrepreneurship as we talk about kind of this global lens of impact. I think one, we've highlighted, you heard it from JT Best, just the idea of innovation, right? Innovation, the idea of taking products, solutions to the marketplace to solve problems. I think if you look historically, it's always the entrepreneurs that drive this type of innovation. So that's one lens. And then the second lens where I think entrepreneurship has impact globally is on the social stratification. So we talk about social mobility. We talk about someone being from the lower ranks of society, quote unquote, socioeconomically speaking, and then making it to the Forbes 400 list. Well, how was that? It wasn't because of social class. It wasn't because of network. It was because of entrepreneurship, building something of value, value creation, value extraction, et cetera. So those are kind of the 2 points that I like to highlight.
Diallo, let's just go with you.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with, any incubator, accelerator, investor, anyone you talk to if you're working on a new idea, one of the first questions out of their mouth is going to be, what problem do you solve? And if you can't answer that in a compelling way, then you're probably not going to have a second conversation. So I think to that point, the number one thing that entrepreneurs do is they come in and they solve problems. I think the other important thing is, entrepreneurs take chances, they take risks, and they move the world forward, right? It's how a company like Sears disappears overnight, right? Because they get complacent, they get comfortable, they have a lot of people who are secure in their position, and then the rug gets slipped right out from under them, right? Because they don't see opportunity that other people who are looking for opportunity, looking to solve problems, looking to create, looking to innovate, see, and have the ability to move forward. So, I'd say those are the biggest ones I think of.
Yeah, the first word that I thought of was agency, especially in the climate realm, because the problems are really big. Like, it's overwhelming to think about what we need to do and how fast we need to do it. And I see a lot of people that just kind of shut down with that. It's hard to feel like we're a generation where the future might not be as good as the past, and to hold that and wrestle with these things. But I see a real importance in being able to feel, in spite of that, that you have agency, that you have an opportunity to use your life to make some kind of change. And my journey, coming from this real social and environmental mindset, it was a journey for me to come from there and to realize that it was an entrepreneurial skill set that I had to try to make the world a better place. And that can get implemented in all kinds of different incorporation structures, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit or any kind of really interesting things that are merging in between. But yeah, I think that core idea that you can create change in the world around you, that's through entrepreneurship that I really see that happening. Something
that was brought up, the creating change and also talking about the problem solving. Those of you that are entrepreneurship students or have at least taken an entrepreneurship class, the very first day we talk about what problem are you going to solve. And those of you that have gone through the launch box and some of these initiatives, it really is, you need to be solving a problem. Don't just create something that you think is needed. You need to make sure that that problem is being solved. What is your view into the near-term future and beyond in the industry in which you work, or the challenge that you're we'll call it industry at this point, but what do you see is going to happen in this 5 to 10 year horizon where we really think we can make an impact? Eric, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I think from a climate perspective, again, a lot of us hope that there'd be some kind of federal legislation that would make all the things happen, and that this other world would just come. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that that is not happening. not for a while, at least. And so it's really up to us to build that future, and to do so at all of these different scales, to do it in our communities, to do it in the businesses that we work in. So I see the next 5 to 10 years being just a real surge of creativity and implementation around bringing these ideas to life. And we also look at like the international climate conferences, COPs, and I'm often disappointed in what they were able to achieve, but still they're signaling a direction. And where we really see that being picked up the most is in business. And really phenomenal changes are happening every day in boardrooms, in startups, that are really taking what is obvious, what a trend that is obvious at a global scale, and putting that into practice.
Let me follow up real quickly. You had mentioned when we were talking earlier about mobilizing communities. Do you want to talk about that challenge and how you're able to mobilize those communities?
Yeah, so I've been working really at depth in communities that aren't putting forward ambitious climate plans or even talking about it in any local government settings. And so it has been a really interesting process for me to learn kind of the long game of how do you build trust in these communities? How do you show that this goal that that I am bringing forward for impact on climate has a lot of different things that you share values with. So working in rural communities and seeing how the farming practices that we're working to implement have incredible benefits for soil health and water infiltration and drought resistance, and can improve the profits and bottom lines for farmers. And that this can happen at a community-wide scale as well, and that even little tiny Lancaster County spends $2 billion a year on fossil fuels. And so there's a really strong economic case to be made here. So trying to bring together all these different threads of motivation for why we would do this kind of work and weave it together into this story that we all share together, regardless of the initial motivations that we bring.
Okay, thank you. Diallo, next 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years. Well, I'm just amazed at how socially enlightened the next generation is. I mean, even conversations, a 14-year-old and 11-year-old, and some of the things that they say is just, it's pretty amazing. Some of the conversations, the dialogue that they're already having in class. I see this from, students your age. I see it from kids, or young adults just coming out of college. And I'm actually encouraged by it. So I think with the tools that are available to the next generation and the ability to build things at the grassroots level, to be able to create movements at the grassroots level, to implement technology, to be able to start new ideas and have that motivation. And I think just the mindset of the generation that's coming behind us in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and the fact that there's just such an overwhelming determination to have a social impact in a way that when I was coming up we didn't have. It wasn't a broad-based idea that I actually want to go to work for a company that has a purpose. I don't want to just go work for Goldman Sachs. And I think the relationship that they expect to have with their employers is really interesting. They expect more from their employers. They expect more from these businesses. They expect them to be able to behave in an ethical way, in a certain way. We see the growth of, and I don't know if you're familiar with B Corps. There's a whole socially responsible designation. When we built our insurance company, we actually got it certified as a B Corp. And we had a lot of young people who were thinking that way. So I think that's something I'm really interested to see, how the next generation that's 5, 10, 15 years coming up when they're going to have some, talking about agency, with all the tools at their disposal and that kind of mindset, what kind of impact that generation will have.
Okay, great. Brian, next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so I have a similar vantage point, so I'm going to echo what Diallo said. Even when you talk about the publicly traded markets, so publicly traded companies, you look at investment banks, one criteria that they're now ranking, where analysts are ranking, a said stock with price targets, et cetera, one criteria now is ESG. So that's coming from, that's more of a bottom-up thing, because that's not like old school, like, oh, well, what's their social governance policy? Well, young people are curious. They don't want to stay in a hotel that doesn't have recycling policy, or that isn't LEED. They don't want to stay in a hotel that's not LEED certified, or they don't want to work with an employer that doesn't have some type of ESG policy, or that doesn't have a DEI policy for hiring diversity and inclusion. So I think this younger generation is a lot more conscious, and I almost think they're more conscious because they're more connected. Right? So a lot of people criticize Gen Ys and Gen Zs. Oh, they're always to their devices, always to their devices. And I think that's just kind of where consumer behavior is, where the phone is now an extension. It's like intelligence, not AI, but it's IA, right? Intelligent augmentation. Like, this is an extension of your brain. It's part of your peripheral. They call it the second neural. And I think because of that connectivity, they're now a lot more conscious of what's going on. And that makes them a lot more vigilant and vocal, because they now have the education to talk about certain things. So I do see a lot more environmental consciousness. I do see a lot more entrepreneurship because of that connectivity, and because of that connectivity also lends itself to this element of creativity. We see in the NFT space, we hear about 11-year-olds selling $5 million worth of NFTs. Well, that's due to that creativity and connectivity that comes from that consciousness. So I think I'm optimistic about the outlook of this younger generation as it comes to terms of ESG. One really good book I refer to everyone is by Yuval Harari, who's professor emeritus at University of Tel Aviv. He's written several books, Homo Sapiens, Homo Deus, but his latest book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and this is not verbatim, but pretty much he was suggesting, like, oh, well, what should a person do to be competitive in the 21st century? Should I learn Hindi? Should I learn Mandarin? Should I learn how to code? He said those things are great. Those are great skill sets, but he says the major skill set for success in the 21st century is going to be adaptability. So your ability to adapt to change, when realizing that you've dedicated 10 years learning Mandarin, but now you must learn Arabic. Right? So your ability to pivot and your willingness to pivot. So I think that, along with the consciousness and connectivity.
Just read all of his books.
Yeah, read all his books. Yeah, basically go to Amazon, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart, add to cart.
I completely agree. I've read all 3 of the ones you referenced. I actually listened to all of them during COVID. So if you can also do audiobooks. So all of you should be having that on your radar.
Oh, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
Okay, we're going to have one more question, then we're going to open it up for the audience. So all of you have connections to Penn State. Do you have any insights for our students? Like, if you were a student, like looking back on your student days, any insights or encouragement or, thoughts for them?
You guys are both alums, right? Yeah. So I'll jump start.
Yeah.
All right, because I'm not an alum. Everyone can't be perfect. But nonetheless, I was on faculty for 5 years. And even with that experience, I was given a symposium on last Saturday. And there was this 70-year-old guy that happened to be in the crowd of 400 people. And he was a Penn State alum. I made some reference to Penn State. This was via Zoom. And he put his background as like the Nittany Lion. So I was like, yeah, Ed, I see you. We are. He's like, Penn State. So one thing that you have to understand, the value of Penn State, and I don't care if you go to a top Ivy League school, you guys have a network like no other. You guys have the most active alum network. That's the major asset, in my personal opinion, to graduating from Penn State. I think there are 500 or 600,000 active, 800,000. Wow, it's grown since I've left 3 years ago. 800,000 people globally. I was in Japan and I saw a guy with a Penn State. I was flying to Vietnam. I was in Penn State. It was a guy, appeared to be Asian or Japanese, so I assume we in Japan. He had a Penn State shirt on. I said, "Where are you?" He turned around, "Penn State," right? And I was like, wow, that alumni network. So if you're not tapping into that, if you're not going on LinkedIn, search Penn State College in whatever industry, whatever business you're starting, you aren't picking those people's brain. Like, you guys all should have known and been connected to JT. Like, I found JT, I was teaching a technology class. I did a case study on him like 4 years ago with my students. And I was like, just go on LinkedIn, type in Penn State as a college, and just type in whatever you're interested in. Food distribution, Giant Corporation, Whole Foods, Costco. You want to get your pasta sauce in Costco? There is a Penn State alum that works at Costco. I'm not a gambling man, but I'm willing to put money on it. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure there's some other things that you guys can take advantage of, but to me, that's the biggest amenity, the biggest asset of being connected to Penn State is that alumni network. Use it.
I also, just a side comment, so I'm in the business school, and there's a lot of recruiting by major corporations in all colleges across the university, but it's one of those, when we talk to recruiters, they talk about the Penn State students of being a little more scrappy than an Ivy League student. So there's this reputation that Penn Staters work harder, and they come out just knowing how to be agile, knowing how to solve those problems and seek opportunities. Diallo.
Yeah, I mean, you're also on a campus with 40,000 something people, right? So there's a certain level of social intelligence you have to navigate this place and be successful, and that's an incredible training ground for when you move to Atlanta or you move to Dallas or you move to San Francisco. Not to mention, once you get there, there will be a network of people. And you can go watch a football game on a Saturday and meet someone who works for the bank around the corner or the latest startup. I guarantee it. So, to Brian's point over here, use that network. There's nothing more important. I've had Penn State students who are moving to New York, getting a job, interested in a particular industry that maybe I crossed over into. Just send me a message, like a nice message, thoughtful message on LinkedIn. I'll connect with them in a second, and if I can help them out, I would. So, put yourself out there, make sure you're networking. And I think just a general thing that I think is important, put yourself in some uncomfortable situations. Like, discomfort is growth, right? You could come here, and maybe you went to high school around Philly, and two of your buddies are here too, and you spend all your 4 years hanging out with them. You had a great time. That's great. Or you could go out, extend yourself, try different things. Go study in Spain. Go, study in Japan. I think it's really important to get outside of your comfort zone. Especially if you are interested in entrepreneurship. If you're interested in being an entrepreneur, you have to be comfortable with discomfort. And it's probably the most important thing. They say, like, the number one rule if you're starting a new business, you're working on a startup, is get out of the building, right? You could sit where you're comfortable. You could do all the analysis in the world. You can Google things. You can make charts and graphs, but nothing is going to matter until you get out of the building, you engage with people, you really start trying to figure out, can this thing work in the real world? And that's the only thing that people are going to give you credit for. So those are my two pieces of advice.
Yeah. One of mine that's just super practical is the 497 courses, which means it's like an experimental, who knows if we'll do this again kind of thing. In every department, I would just search departments for 497 courses and like fill up my course load with things I needed to do, and then every semester tacked on a 497 and just learned some new thing. And they were often discussion-based. You read a bunch of stuff and go somewhere. And that was really, that's how I went to the Ojibwe reservation was a 497 course, and I went to Jordan for a summer studying soils, how civilizations rise and fall over time. Like these just seemingly random things that, as I look back, are deeply rooted in how I think about the world. So that's one. And then another one is just to build stuff and try things while you're here. Like, you can learn all the things that you would in your courses for free on YouTube. So what is the difference about the value of why you're here? Like, try to figure out what the difference is, and really spend your time meeting people and doing everything that is not a part of what an education would be like by yourself on YouTube. Yeah, and just always build stuff and have fun.
Yeah, great advice. Thanks to all of you. Any questions from the audience? Royce? Or do we have another? Oh, sure. Royce, you want to go ahead?
What was the most gut-wrenching professional moment for you guys?
So the question is, what was the most gut-wrenching professional moment for each of you?
Yeah, I have one.
I have a couple.
I'm trying to go on the record for this one. But during my stint in investment banking, we were working on a transaction of about 32 retail spaces. So if anyone's been to South Florida, you have these small kind of like box style retail spaces. It might be like a pawn shop and then a nail salon, and kind of class B type development, but nonetheless they pump out a lot of cash flow. So we had a portfolio of about 32 of these that we were trying to sell for a client. Just for a cultural context, the client that we were selling this portfolio for were originally from, they're Russian, they're of Russian descent. We found a buyer, and for social context, the buyers happen to be of Israeli descent. And maybe being stereotypical, but both of those cultures have very aggressive business practices, or different business practices than what we're accustomed to. I shouldn't say aggressive. That's me being judgmental. So nonetheless, we're doing this transaction, and somehow the Israeli group needed to put in some fair, like a fair deposit on the property so we could delist the property and start the engagement. They somehow faked the bank wire. I have no idea to this day how they did it. They faked the bank wire for this like $5 million deposit. And we took it off the listing. We had other parties that were very interested. So the games kind of began from there. As the weeks transpired, we realized they faked the bank deposit. Like, oh, we're going to put it back in, and they did put some money, and the money disappeared from the bank. So after about 45 days of due diligence and these guys like at each other's necks, we're sitting at the closing table. Again, this is a multi-million-dollar deal. And the gentlemen start getting into a heated argument. And one gentleman, and this is in Brickell, which is the financial district of Miami. We're in a Class A building. We're on like the 26th floor, beautiful view of Biscayne Bay. One of the parties, the older guy in the party, whips out a knife and jumps across the table and stabs the buying party in the arm. So then they commence to fighting. There's blood on the contract. There's blood on my tie. And I'm under this table like, what in the hell? This is before Netflix movies are like, this should be a Netflix movie. So people are like, hey, Brian, I was like, man, I'm 5'9" with shoes on. I'm not breaking up any fight. You guys got to call the police. So no charges were pressed. The deal was closed. They did not shake hands, but the deal was closed. And they walked away to the hospital. And so that's probably the most gut-wrenching professional, semi-professional UFC investment banking story that I've experienced thus far. So.
Can either of you top that? We can do gut-wrenching.
Pass.
have your winery story. You
I'm
should-
not going to get into that today. My students know that story, but okay. No other gut wrenching. Okay. Other questions? Great question, Royce. Derek, any questions online?
No, but if anybody's watching online, if you want to announce.
If anyone's watching online and wants to put a question in the chat, we will make sure it's answered. Any other questions? James?
I'll ask a question. We've certainly seen employees and consumers have this preference for socially aware, environmentally conscious companies. Are you seeing the investor world also come around and start to change their investing criteria and add value, basically upvalue companies that have that triple bottom line mode of operating?
So for those of you online, the question is, we have talked about employers and we've talked about consumer businesses, well, businesses in general, being interested in these social impact side of things. Are you seeing it also on the investment side?
Yeah, it's actually great to see all of these funds being started and spun up with these investment philosophies that are focused on specific impact goals. And I feel like there is a new one every day, especially when it comes to sustainability and climate impact. But you're seeing funds, just as far as investment and when it comes to equity investment, the distribution of investment when it comes to socioeconomic demographics, I mean, it's like crazy skewed. Like, if you look 2 years ago, the amount of money that flowed into women-founded businesses, it was appalling, just as one example. So it is actually really great to see funds that actually have a mandate. And they say, we are looking for these types of founders. We're trying to correct this. So yeah, 100%. You're seeing impact investing funds sprouting up every day. Billions of dollars out there right now in the market, not only on particular areas of interest, but also on the types of founders that they're looking for.
I'd like to echo that just slightly. I have the pleasure of sitting on the board of an impact investing fund. And at the first board meeting about a month ago, it was these incredible women, and it wasn't. There's a couple of the investees that sit on the board as well, and I was sitting there and I was like, just wow. I was so inspired by everyone on the board, but also the mission and the company's missions that we're looking at. So it needs to be. We're still a step away, or 5 steps away, from it being completely mainstream. But there are portfolio, like all of you that have 401ks and are investing, there's going to be a fund somewhere in what you're offered that has an impact mission. So
It probably already is.
yeah, dig a little deeper. Don't just accept what they're giving you from your 401k side of things, but look for things that are mission driven and something that you actually believe in. And invest, when you have the opportunity, invest in what you believe in.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that kind of goes back to our conversation earlier about the ESG. And a lot of analysts are now evaluating publicly traded companies on how are they performing in this sector. And you can actually get, downgraded possibly because of not performing well in that sector. So publicly traded markets are doing it. I'm seeing funds allocated to transgender founders, women founders. Obviously, diversity and inclusion has been kind of a hot area as well. So I think people are just being a lot more conscious. You have funds that are solely dedicated to those type of founders. Then you have funds that promise to allocate a certain of their fund to said causes as well on the privately traded markets. That ESG is even becoming a reoccurring thing so outside the kind of socioeconomic aspects of fundraising, they want to see some type of ESG. They want to see some type of B Corp. They want to see some type of philanthropy, because not only is it smart business, it's also kind of a marketing angle. If you look at Warby Parker, you look at Tom's shoes, I mean,
Bombas.
yeah, Bombas, you know, the no-show socks, right? They have this philanthropic thing built in, but if you look at their margins, they just charge you twice of what they would have charged if they didn't have this philanthropic. So it makes good business sense, but it's also a marketing angle. So it's a smart business, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people weren't believers. I remember, you guys all know Etsy. I remember, you know, Etsy being the first B Corp to go public. And a lot of people, there were a lot of naysayers about it out there.
It's a Brooklyn company, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Brooklyn based. So, you know, and a lot of people are kind of following now. You know, now you, like you're saying, you see the Warby Parkers, the Bombas, and so many other companies that are following suit.
I would also say that kind of adjacent, the environmental movement in the last 10 years has gotten a lot more financially creative. Like there's a group called Engine One, I think, that was that just did a shareholder resolution with Exxon in the last year and a half and managed to get 3 board members placed on Exxon's board, saying that, you know, it is the only viable way for the future for this fossil fuel company is to reevaluate their entire business model, was essentially the resolution that they were putting forward. You know, it said we weren't seeing stuff like that 10 years ago. It's a real shift.
Any other questions? There, question? Yeah.
Earlier you were mentioning how you basically went wherever the opportunity was. So I'm sure that like there are some things that kind of seem questionable and like maybe not in your best interest. So how do you filter what you actually take up and what you know don't filter?
Okay, to repeat the question, you were talking about following opportunity, but were there times when you were questioning if that was the right opportunity? Is that the gist of the question?
Absolutely. I think when you kind of start your career off, you do a little less vetting because you're like, man, this is an opportunity. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to rock the boat. But as you progress and you increase your skill set and your value in the marketplace, you then can use discernment. So right now, the company that I'm working with, Evidation Health, they want to address, you know, these health disparities in certain communities. Previous to that, I was only focused on optimization. Like, you have an ad tech company, we're optimizing to do what? To sell more ads, to sell more stuff, pushing consumerism. So it wasn't like this kind of legacy piece. So this is becoming a lot more conscious as a growth marketer. You know, I want to promote things that are making the world a better place. I don't want to just promote optimization for consumerism, optimization for the sake of optimization, you know. So I've become a lot more conscious. That's probably my phone because I live off of batteries and alarms.
Okay.
So I have become a lot more conscious as years have gone by.
Yeah, I would say thinking through the lens of the entrepreneur or startup entrepreneur, making a choice on the things that you do or the things that you don't do. The great thing about everything at your disposal right now is that you could fail really fast and fail really inexpensively, right? Like you can, you know, if you want to start a software company a couple of decades ago, you were hauling a server out and like, you know, trying to some hardware and setting it up and finding like a sysadmin and like doing all these crazy things. Like if we wanted to start a software company, we could have the first iteration of the environment spun up in 10 minutes. And for, you know, change in our pocket. It's pretty amazing. So you also have all these tools when it comes to, you know, Brian's expertise as far as testing a market and using SEO and using all of these digital tools at your disposal as well. So I think when it comes to trying things out as an entrepreneur, there are really, really great techniques that you could do things really cheaply and inexpensively, and you can iterate and you can fail fast and you can get to that minimum viable product and find out where value lies. So when it comes to starting new things and trying new things, you know, I think it's all about taking advantage of those things to iterate quickly and fail quickly and take that feedback and that data back from the market and evolving based on what you learn.
Anything you want to add?
I have one little piece. You have something, Eric?
No, I'm good.
And I think also one thing that I've been able to develop as an entrepreneur is just my being more self-aware and addressing kind of my own kind of cognitive dissonance that I'm kind of balancing, addressing my own maybe self-limiting beliefs. But something I have, and I shared it with some of the founders I met with yesterday during my office hours, is I call it the grandma test. You know, is this something that you'll be willing to call your grandma up, right? Is this something you'll be willing to call your grandmother up and tell her about? And if there's a hesitancy, if there's a little like, I don't know if I'm gonna tell grandma about this one, it's probably something you shouldn't do, right? So think about that. So is this something, and I think Warren Buffett has something similar where he talks about he wouldn't do anything that he wouldn't want to be printed in the local newspaper. And that's kind of been his like litmus test. So in his business practice, is this something I want to put on your local newspaper, like the town you grew up where everyone knows you, everyone knows your family? Is this something you want on front page? You know, so for me, it's the grandma. For Warren Buffett, it's the front page. So, you know, because one thing about that connectivity that we have advantages over, you guys don't. Like when we were in college, there was social media, but it was in infancy. We could get away with a few things. You guys can't get away with anything. Your digital legacy is in the cloud in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. So you have to be more conscious than we were about decisions, what you support, how you feel, what you say, where you say it, who you say it to. All that stuff is recorded. And I'm not even talking like any NSA or nefarious, cabal or, take over the world conspiracies. I'm talking about just on the digital cloud somewhere. It's sitting on a server somewhere in Malaysia. I don't know. Anything and everything you say. So just be conscious. You know, what did Michael Jackson say? Remember to always think twice.
We have one final question from online.
Yes. Yep. Betty asks, I forget who touched on the B Corp certification, but could you elaborate on what it was like going through the certification process?
It was Diallo, right?
Man, it was heavy.
Oh.
It was really heavy, and I think they've streamlined it quite a bit. But there were a lot of steps to go through it, and then not only that, there was an audit you had to go through. I think there was an annual B Corp audit in order to make sure that you were maintaining all the criteria, the original criteria. But that was a long time ago. We actually had one of the founders of the B Corp was on our board. So I think overall it's a great thing, and I'm glad people are adopting it. I think it's actually international now. But back then, it was a bit of a lift, but I'm pretty sure it's been more streamlined now.
Are there examples of things that changed in how you were working as a company through by going through the B Corp process?
I think it was a case of, looking at the B Corp and, their ideals and the criteria and kind of the morality question, and it was like we backed into it. So I think for the company where I was at when we first did it, we were saying, well, we're already living these ideals, we're already living these values. So, it wasn't a case of like we need change and we need to start behaving this way. And I think that's probably most of the companies that did it initially. They're like, we already live this way. I know Etsy had very, very strong values and mission orientation before they did it. But to the point that you both have been making, I think now a lot of companies are coming around and being like, well, we need something like this, and we need guidelines to help us achieve this. So now you're getting a lot more companies like that on board.
Yeah, and just a comment on the B Corps. The reviews are, I think, every third year, and it's actually from your peers. It's not like it's not a team that comes in and audits you. The audit's actually from other companies that are B Corps. And you don't have to register as a B Corp initially. You can transition into a B Corp as well. So just a couple side notes. I want to make one comment to the students that are listening in the room. We're talking a lot about these issues that are these big issues that are impacting our world, and it may seem a bit overwhelming, But I would encourage you, you're going to have your career focus, but you're also going to have time that you can dedicate to volunteering or getting involved in other ways. So think about opportunities that are not only within your career, but other opportunities to get involved in areas that are important to you. So you're obviously here because you think it's important and talking about changing the world in some capacity. And I encourage all of you to change that little bit that you can. We do, we'll love to expand this next year during Startup Week, to have a whole day talking about social impact and building communities. But on behalf of Penn State and Penn State Startup Week, powered by PNC and Event Penn State, thank you, Brian, Diallo, and Eric. We really appreciate what you're doing professionally to change the worlds in which you're all working, but also we appreciate you dedicating your time to come back and sharing with us. So, and thanks all of you for coming, attending, both
Yeah.
online and in person.
Thank you.
Thank you.